Hello, protocols, packets, and programs. Cybersecurity Awareness Month could have been no November. No scaring people about public Wi-Fi in a world of everything HTTPS. No telling people to pick passwords with punctuation in a world of passkeys. No patching every single CVE in a world of secure design. No wonder we stuck with October. Which means this week we have a sponsored interview with Rob Allen from ThreatLocker about resisting ransomware and delivering better defaults for the holidays. Think yes, and stay tuned for Application Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show to learn the latest tools and techniques to understand DevOps, applications, and the cloud. Your trusted source for the latest AppSec news. It's time for Application Security Weekly. Ransomware, supply chain attacks, 0 days. Cyber threats don't wait, and neither should your defenses. With ThreatLocker, you're not just reacting to threats, you're stopping them before they start. Our Zero Trust endpoint protection locks down your environment with pinpoint control over what's allowed to run and what's not. No guesswork, no blind spots. Just proactive, built-for-now security that keeps your business moving. Want to see how a true default deny strategy works? Head over to securityweekly.com/threatlocker and take the first step towards shutting the door on threats before they even knock. This is episode 356, recorded November 10th, 2025. I'm your host, Mike Shima, and I'm here with Adrian Sanabria. We both are on the episode at the same time. Hello, Adrian.
Hey, yeah, usually I'm stepping in when you've got something else going on. Had a lot of fun with the Halloween episode. Got some compliments on my opening. I try and retain your style and do like a bit of a poem at the beginning there, and it just came together really naturally for me. I was very proud of it. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to that.
Oh, I absolutely love it, and absolutely appreciate that you found the topic so scary, post-quantum crypto and all those things. So listeners, if you haven't already, go check out Adrian, and indeed, he embraces the ASW vibes, possibly even better than I do. So go check for yourself. Another familiar face we have with us is Rob. He is the Chief Product Officer at ThreatLocker. He has over 2 decades of experience helping businesses embrace technology while navigating its evolving challenges. And now he's helping orgs recover from attacks and implement proactive defenses, yay for that, to help secure their futures. Hello, Rob. Thank you for joining us.
Technically avoid more than recover, but we'll go with both.
Avoid is always much better. But, and I think we're going to start off with maybe some story time with Rob, that not everybody these days can avoid ransomware. And you have an article, a scenario that came up just recently that I'm not going to spoil too much other than it just made me really, really sad before the holidays begin. But I don't want to steal your thunder. Tell us a little bit about some of the recent ransomware that you've seen.
Well, it's again not seen personally. Have seen written about. Have seen reports about. More than have seen personally. The specific one that sort of piqued my interest was the report that the state of Nevada published after a recent ransomware attack. And it's pretty standard fare in terms of what happened. Probably the most interesting part of it was that the threat actors actually used search advertisements to basically trick somebody instead of going to a legitimate vendor site like Putty or WinSCP or something like that. They're actually using paid malvertisements, basically redirecting to images of the original site. So it looks like Putty's actual site or WinSCP or KeyPass or whatever the case may be, but you're actually downloading malware. Sometimes it's just pure malware. So I think they actually refer to it as malware-laced software, in which case you would hope that a reasonably good detection tool might step in and find it, but obviously not so much in this case. But again, just the fact that people can be so easily tricked into going to what Google says they should go to. So I suppose lesson number one is just be careful of search results. They're not always the most dependable.
There's absolutely, we might even go on a long tangent about the search results and those search pages anyway, because even with ads, yes, it says sponsored in very minuscule text, but so many search pages is here's the AI summary, here are the sponsored links or the ad links, and here is maybe the same link that actually matches the same link for an ad if it's a legitimate site. But mostly I'm just prefacing that of trying to resist blame the user. And I know you didn't say that either, but it also, what really just struck me was just the long sigh of they clicked on a link and the ransomware happened. And so much of what I tried to make fun of, honestly, is October Cybersecurity Month that just says, don't click on links. But I hope that, do I have to do I have to eat my shoe or something like that? Am I totally off base here? What can we do better?
Well, to be honest, there was quite a number of steps between the clicking on the link and the ransomware happening. So it wasn't quite that straightforward, because obviously they needed to get in, they needed to give themselves persistent access. They had, C2 communication set up. They had to get elevated. Well, they didn't have to, but they did get elevated permission. They moved laterally within the network. They actually used just RDP to connect from one machine to another within the network. They used a commercial remote management or RMM tool. Which again, in a lot of cases and a lot of environments, something like a commercial RMM tool is not going to get blocked or picked up by an AV or an EDR, because again, it's not bad software. So there was quite a number of different steps that took place between the clicking on the link and the ransomware happening. But again, you would hope that there would be.
I love that you mentioned that, Rob. I just want to emphasize the point that attacks don't happen in a single step. Right. Like your users should be able to safely click on the wrong things. Right. That's something I've been shouting about for over a decade. And, ever since I first saw vendors in the category that Threat Locker is in here, I was like, we can start building something where it is safe for people to do their jobs without fear of being blamed for clicking the wrong thing.
And it builds on that idea of, there's a cliche that I also rail against, like attackers only have to be right once, defenders need to be right all the time. Right. But Rob, you were listing a lot of steps that if there had been maybe a better, more secure default, that's a lot of what we talked about last time we had you on the show. If there had been more monitoring, or someone had been paying attention to monitoring, there were a couple of chances there. It's Nevada, we could have played the odds. The odds should have been in the favor of the defender in this case. It just so happened that obviously it wasn't.
Well, again, it comes back to the idea of living off the land and why living off the land is so effective for a bad actor, because you're not going to do that many things that are going to trigger your traditional defense tools, your traditional reactive, detection response functions. So, as I said, things like running a remote RMM tool is not going to trip up most EDRs. Something like connecting via RDP is not going to trip up most EDRs. I mean, it could be considered in most instances sort of expected or normal behavior. So the question is then, how do you stop things like this? One of the interesting things is, even if they did download, as it was called, a malware-laced version of whatever tool they were looking for. So say it's a putty, for example. One of the cool things about Threat Locker is we maintain application definitions for things like putty. So if you download putty and run it will be allowed to run if you've got a policy to allow putty. If it's not putty, even pertaining to be putty, whether it be, similar installer or, same icon or whatever, but it's malware pretending to be putty, it ain't going to be able to run. Not because we need to recognize it to be bad, because we don't. It's not going to match our built-in definition for putty. And you can multiply that by dozens of different examples, hundreds, actually 10,000 different examples, which is how many application definitions we maintain at this point. But that's one example. Another one that we came across was an unfortunate an MSP who basically, and they came to us quite late in the being breached process, but they had, one of their staff had downloaded some cracked software. And again, it's another great example of, you get a cracked version of Photoshop, for example, and you might think, this is great, I've just saved myself, $20 a month.
Stuff comes along for the ride, though.
Absolutely. And again, it's another really cool thing about Threat Locker.
When you get it for free.
dodgy version of Photoshop, it's not going to be allowed to run because it's not the actual Photoshop. So there's so many different examples of that. But yeah.
So, again, want to highlight something you said there, Rob. I think for the longest time in our minds, we've kind of thought of malware in one bucket and everything that's not malware, okay and trustworthy in the other bucket. But if you don't actively use TeamViewer and it suddenly shows up on an endpoint, might as well be malware, right? You know, like you have complete control over the computer. It might as well be a Trojan or a rat or something like that.
Absolutely.
So we can't think of things as so binary.
Yeah, it's probably more effective than a Trojan because the likelihood is a Trojan is going to get picked up, whereas a TeamViewer
It's more full featured too.
Absolutely, you can do so much with it. I mean, one of my to digress slightly, one of my favorite, and favorite is a really bad word to use in the context of cyber attacks, but one of my favorite cyber attack over the last number of years was one on a water treatment facility here in Florida. And it was kind of, I'm not going to say it was reported as an advanced cyber attack. And basically what happened is, I can't remember what the name of the place was. I probably could find out, but I'm too lazy. But basically somebody got into a water treatment facility and they started playing with levels of chemicals to dangerous levels. I mean, they literally could have killed people. So it is quite a serious event. But as I said, it was described, and I always have in my head Homer Simpson sitting at the controls of the nuclear power plant. But somebody was literally sitting at a computer and they saw these chemical levels getting adjusted. And that was what tipped them off as to what was happening. But the reported as an advanced cyber attack was literally just somebody got into a TeamViewer account, got into the machine and started playing around. So it doesn't need malware to be dangerous. I mean, pretty much everything is to some fashion, whether it be through vulnerabilities or utility, pretty much everything is weaponizable if you go about it the right way.
And that's kind of living off the land is what we've seen too, is that trying to, I'll pull in the idea of the cloud, because there's on development and production systems, there's an idea of no hands on keyboards. Like, why are you manually reaching out to a cloud system? Like, it should be done through some type of automated script, some type of automated feature. Yeah, because you want them to be immutable. That's the favorite word. But we have the luxury, if I'm looking at that from the application perspective, to say, hey, my cloud environment is supposed to be immutable. Once you try to do that on a user endpoint, their laptop, their system, that's a little bit harder, because maybe they do need some of these services or some of these applications, maybe not the cracked version of Photoshop. That's harder to justify.
You would hope not.
Hope not. But it does feel like, and here I think I'm kind of setting up the obvious part of this, of like, we can either go and enumerate all of the potentially bad dual use, to coin a phrase, types of applications out there, or we can just say, what do you need? But it still feels like the what do you need for your job can be tough, because what happens when there's something wasn't on the list? And here I'm trying to pull in that idea of the user experience, because another thing, if we're going to complain about what AppSec has been doing poorly, it's saying, follow these processes and don't worry about what the developer experience is like, user experience. We're doing it for their own good, but that doesn't help. So I'm curious, Rob, and Adrian, if you've seen this too, what are ways to actually embrace users so they understand that we're trying to avoid the living off the land, the Hyper-V, you don't need to pull down this VM to be running things, but we'll still let you do your job, because there's definitely a friction there.
No, well, there's, fundamentally what we espouse as a way of looking at things as default deny, but there is a really important aspect to default deny, which is permit by exception. And the default deny is what's going to keep you safe. The permit by exception is what allows people to do their jobs. It's what allows developers to develop. It allows users to do things. So that is a really important thing to consider. But I mean, most users, the vast majority of users do the same things in the same way with the same software every single day. I mean, I'm a relatively advanced user in terms of what I do, but in reality, there's probably maybe 10, at most 15 different things that I need to do on my computer on any given day, whether it be, running browsers, things like this, video conferencing tools, Teams, Zoom, Hyper-V. There's not that much else, and realistically, most developers are the same. So obviously they've got development tools in the equation, but outside of that, is there that? I mean, do they need to be able to run TeamViewer? Do they need to be able to run AnyDesk? Do they need to be able to run Cooper, the coupon flipper from China? Probably not. So it's not about getting in people's way. And in the vast majority of cases, you just don't get in people's way because they just work within the guardrails that you're setting for them. So it need not be drama. It need not cause friction with users. And at the end of the day, you're going to stop, otherwise weaponizable things from being weaponized.
Yeah, and I think what I see a lot of organizations doing, I advise a lot of enterprises, and generally it is default deny, but there's a catalog of tools that you can use, so you join a company and oftentimes they will have, like we standardize on VS Code, and here's a bunch of plugins that we've already gone out. We've taken a look at, we're comfortable with them. We think they're safe. They're secure for now, right? Anything can happen to some of these in flight. So you have to continue looking for, did they just sell that plugin to, Russia, or, did it get backdoored in some way? That stuff does happen. But at least, kind of standardizing on stuff that most developers are familiar with and comfortable using, can kind of stem some of that, this person's using Sublime and this person's using Cursor, and like every developer is just kind of BY, bring your own tool set, right? And now you have to worry about 15 different IDEs, instead of just securing one.
Yeah, no, well, standardization is a huge thing. It's something, I mean, look, I've got a team of 60, 70 developers sitting outside my office right now. They're all running Locker on their machines, so it doesn't get in their way in terms of being able to do what they need to do. And as I said, it need not get in anybody's way in terms of them doing what they need to do. But what you mentioned with, 15 different IDEs or, 15 different editors or whatever the case may be, again, everything that you allow to run in your environment increases your attack surface. So, whether it be Notepad++ or, so as you said, somebody else is using Sublime, whatever the case may be. I mean, every single piece of software that you use increases the attack surface. Sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot with something like TeamViewer. So, again, if you can minimize that, if you can say, well, look, this is what we use in this organization and use these things and you're going to be fine. We're never going to get in your way. But if you start trying to use random other stuff, then absolutely you aren't going to be able to do it. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing from a user perspective, because again, what you can do, what you can't do. There's a very distinct, clear line between what you're allowed to do and what you're not. And it doesn't need to create friction.
And to connect it back to ASW more, absolutely, developers and engineers are the ones targeted because they have the API keys, the credentials, the access to infrastructure. Attackers are even happy to get dev because usually there's a path from dev to prod, right? They're not air gapped. So we see a lot of, we're talking about ransomware here today, but also infostealers are very commonly targeting folks using Macs because most of those engineers and developers prefer Macs. So there's some kind of social engineering component. Like I've seen it, to go back to what we were talking about in the beginning, a lot of malvertising where for months, if you search for OBS, you wanted to download and install OBS. If you click the Google sponsored AdWord link, it came with malware for months. They didn't remove it. And you got OBS, but you also got an info stealer along with it. And it scoops up all the crypto wallets, all the API keys, all the SSH keys, all the OAuth keys from your logged in Slack and Teams sessions. Ships that off to somewhere in the dark web where somebody can buy them and use them to get into your company.
Yeah, and that sets up a segue I wanted to hit in the sense of been focusing on the endpoint because that's how we started, but it shouldn't be the case. We know how this story ends. It shouldn't be the case that endpoint has access to every other endpoint as well. Adrian, as you were mentioning, like the info stealer, they're trying to find those credentials, trying to find those API keys. where this dev system does have direct access to prod, or that secret did leak in a way that it shouldn't. So I just wanted to build that idea of there's multiple steps here too. Protecting the endpoint, minimizing the ability to live off the land. But even if that endpoint's compromised, it shouldn't be game over in the sense of it has unfettered access to anything else, or to the important systems that you have, whether they're prod or your data stores, et cetera. And I think I interrupted you, Rob. You were going to say something as well, but yeah.
No. Again, what you said makes perfect sense. I mean, obviously, a really important part of a lot of these attacks is lateral movement. Now, lateral movement can mean from one machine to another, one machine to a server. It can mean, as you mentioned, Adrian, getting access to, source code. I mean, the attack a number of years ago, the SolarWinds attack, Orion, is a perfect example of this. We actually got access to the source code and were able to change what got pushed out to millions of machines. The really interesting thing about that one was there was a very simple solution to it. Even though the attackers got access to SolarWinds source code, were able to change it, were able to push it out to millions of machines, there was an important step in that attack, which was that those millions of machines, because people implicitly trusted their SolarWinds agent, they're like, I need to run this tool, it's allowed to run on my machine, it can do whatever it needs to do. It was able to go out as part of the attack to talk to a third-party server, actually sitting in New Jersey, if I'm not much mistaken. So the C2 server, the external part of it, was a C2 server sitting in New Jersey. But as I said, because people implicitly trusted their SolarWinds agents, they were able to go and talk to that C2 server. But thinking about it logically, why would my SolarWinds agent, even if I need to run it on my machine, be able to talk to the entire damn internet?
Right.
There's no reason for it to. If it just needs to talk to SolarWinds addresses, whether it be 1 or 100 or 1,000 or whatever subnet, doesn't make any difference. Only let it talk to those locations that it needs to talk to and block it from talking to anywhere else on the internet. I mean, you can apply that principle not just to things like SolarWinds, but to lots of other stuff as well. I mean, the attack we mentioned, the Nevada one, it's another great example. They wiped out backups. Part of the attack, they got access to the backup infrastructure. They basically deleted the backups before they deployed ransomware. But it's another example of, well, look, just because somebody gets access to a backup server, do I want that user, even if it is an administrator, to be able to just randomly delete backups? Probably not. So if the other side of what we call ring fencing, or the other aspect of ring fencing, is, well, we can control where things can go on the internet, but we can also control what data things have access to as well. So even if you are running an Explorer as an administrator, you can't just zap backups or command prompt or PowerShell or whatever thing that they're going to use to try and delete them. If you just say, well, look, only my backup software needs to talk to my backup repository, then you're massively reducing the potential for damage, deletion, destruction if somebody does get in to the environment.
Yeah, and to Mike's point, and to your point here as well, Rob, that's why in Zero Trust, one of the most important principles is kind of walking around and looking at things that could get compromised. Those 6 or 7 developers outside your door, let's assume they're compromised. What does the attacker get? Yeah. What does the attacker get? When this asset, this individual gets compromised and the attacker gets control of their machine or gets control of that asset. And, I recall, I think it was 2022, 2023, there was an Uber breach where they got into the VPN. I think it was the one where they used MFA bombing to finally get somebody to say, fine. And they logged into the VPN. And then from the VPN got to net logon share, which is usually open full control to all Windows machines. And there was a script in there with clear text credentials in it that led to their credential manager. Mm-hmm. And within the credential manager, it was like an enterprise credential management. There was no compartmentalization that those credentials that were in that net logon script that every single person who had a Windows machine had access to. It was everything. It was the marketing and sales tools logins. They had to log into HackerOne or BugCrowd. Like everything was just wide open. Yeah, like you hear these companies, there are still companies in 2025 that require all employees to store their logins, like key critical logins, in a spreadsheet on a open share.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
And so at least this was in a credential manager, but the credential manager does, I mean, it's no better than an Excel spreadsheet on a public share when the credentials are in a script that everyone has access
also
to.
protecting that credential manager is really important as well. So that case I mentioned earlier of the company that downloaded the cracked software, there was a couple of other stages of the attack. One was they were able to get in, and again, presumably was using infrastealers, but they were able to get into the organization's documentation system where they saved all their passwords. So not only for that particular organization, but also for all their customers as well. So again, things like MFA are super important from this perspective. As you said, MFA bombing makes that a little bit trickier. But things like MFA are super, super important. I mean, it's a simple control. I mean, everything should be. But again, you mentioned VPNs. VPNs are a huge source of attacks these days. Now, whether it be through compromised credentials, which again are often for sale on the dark web. I mean, these guys don't even have to do the work. They just go on to a data access broker in the dark web and buy credentials to whatever organization they're looking at or they're looking to target. But yeah, VPNs are a massive source of breaches these days. Compromised credentials, number one, but also vulnerabilities in VPN software or VPN hardware.
Yeah, I want to turn towards it. There's an aspect here too, talking about like as Adrian said, there's so many, especially cybersecurity companies, where your competition is a spreadsheet. Here we are. Use your credential. You're creating a credential manager, or you have a spreadsheet. But what I want to introduce here is, and maybe Rob, I'm curious your thoughts in the sense of perhaps a little bit of where does the responsibility lie? Like, was there a failure in these systems being used that they didn't enable federated user access, or they didn't even support MFA? We still see SaaS, services out there that don't do that, and a little bit of it is trying to figure out
or charge extra.
Or charge extra, yeah. SSO.tax, one of the most fun websites out there. But the point being, like, there's only so much that the company can do to basically pick up failures of software they're using. And I'm curious if I gave you a magic wand and you could wave it and have vendors do something to improve for the state of Nevada, for these other customers using their software, what might be a change that you would really push for or really wish that that they would make?
First of all, I you may have noticed me sort of sitting there with my mouth open for a second. I didn't know SSO tax was a thing, and I didn't know that there was a website called SSO tax that actually told you all the organizations that charge extra for SSO. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. So yeah, I'm sorry. I may have completely missed your question because I'm
yeah, exactly.
Like, oh my god.
So,
but sorry, if the magic wand, unfortunately there is no magic wand. I'd love to say to people there's a magic wand, you wave it and everything's going to be fine. It's not possible. It's a series of steps. It's a way of looking at things. It's a change of approach. It's basically it's all of the above. It isn't a click your fingers and I'm suddenly more secure. You're never going to get hacked again. It is a series of steps. It's a way of looking at things. It's combining different approaches together. And that's probably one of the biggest downfalls that we see, is that people put a lot of faith and trust in one tool or even one type of tool. And the problem is, in a lot of cases, those tools are detection tools. So they're expecting something to detect bad behavior, maliciousness, or whatever the case may be. But the problem is with detection, as you mentioned about the bad guys only having to get lucky once. The problem with detection, if you don't detect it, you can't respond to it. So that leads us back to the living off the land problem, but it also leads us to, unknown malware, 0 days, things have never been seen before. I mean, at the end of the day, and to the sort of the subject of developers, malware is just software. It's just software written with bad intent. I mean, it's the same languages that everybody uses who listens to this. So it's just a question of the intent of the software, as whether it's good or bad. So making decisions, or anything, as far as I'm concerned, that requires decisions to be made about intent, is not always going to get those decisions right. And it only takes one bad decision. You can make 1 million decisions a day about everything that runs, everything you see in an environment. I'm making 1 million decisions, and I get one of those decisions wrong, and it's game over. So that's why decisions, or depending on decisions about good and bad, is not effective, or not always effective, which is why a combination of controls and detection of response is a far better approach.
Yeah, prevention and detection. Yeah, so if I could wave a magic wand, I would have more vendors put in anti-foot gunning recommendations or nags into their products. Yeah. So you guys probably remember a company that very quickly went under after somebody ransomware their AWS. It was an engineer-led company, 5 people, and it was basically like a source code repository tool, code. I forget the name of it now. It was 2015. But they had a root login to AWS. And even back then, I think AWS was nagging you about not having one super account that had access to all your AWS. So their backups, everything, one account had access to everything. It was not compartmentalized at all. And a lot of tools, it's very easy to kind of fall into these kinds of habits where one set of credentials, one identity, one user has access to way too much. And I do think vendors could put in, some anti-foot gunning measures in there to say, you can use our product this way, but it comes with a lot of risk, and here's a better way to run it. Just like you have like those tutorial nags when you first go into a product and it's like, you're not done fully setting up, you're 60% done, something like that. You could do something and say, the recommended way of using this is this. You should have 5 admins, split up the roles, so that not one person can sink the whole ship, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And
Adrian, I don't know if you did that. Sorry, Mike. I was just going to say, I don't know if you did this on purpose. And can you see the T-shirt that's behind my left shoulder? No. Okay, because one of the more recent additions to our suite of products is what's called Defense Against Configurations. And nice. Defense Against Configurations, actually, the genesis of it was that we wanted a method whereby we could check people's threat locker configuration to make sure they hadn't done anything dumb, basically setting it up. Yeah. So I've created a policy that will allow anything to run in my users folder. I mean, that's not a good idea. So one of the things that we check for with DAC is misconfiguration of threat locker policies. Have you set something up to be too permissive? But what we realized when we started doing this was that we should also check for non-threat locker configurations. So, Windows configurations, we have it for Mac now as well, DAC for Mac. But basically just ordinary run-of-the-mill misconfigurations that can often be, you often find out about them when it's too late. So it's no good finding out about a misconfiguration or that you've done something stupid with a firewall or you've been too permissive with a rule or whatever after you've been ransomware. Yeah. You're far better off finding about these things beforehand. So we have now, I think at last count, about 170 checks that DAC runs on every one of our customers' computers and reports back, sorts it, makes it sexy charts, matches against specific frameworks as well. So if you're particularly interested in NIST or SIS or whatever the case may be, it'll tell you, well, SIS said this about this particular configuration. This is why you should change it. We tell people, give them, what the risks are involved with a particular misconfiguration, and also tell them how to fix it. Now, sometimes the fix is going to be a threat locker fix. Sometimes it's just going to be a configuration setting or a change in Windows or Mac or whatever the case may be that people can do themselves. But it's about bringing those misconfigurations front and center. So every time you go in, the first page you go to is your DAC page, and the going to tell you the important or critical misconfigurations that could be used against you. So,
and I think
I'm not going to say we're heady on that one, but it's very much from the angle that you're talking about.
Yeah, and it gives me a chance to that sets me up for a nice segue into one final part I want to talk about is the economics of all this as well. Because, and I think last time none of this is predicated on pay the ransom. It's quite the opposite, in fact. But ransom can be expensive, and recovery can be expensive as well. And you made the point too, Rob, about just there's a lot of detection, but if you don't have anything proactive, even in the very beginning when I was introducing you, you made the point, let's avoid. If you're spending a lot of money on consultants just to come in and more securely configure your Active Directory, your network, your what have you, it's possibly money well spent if you're avoiding that ransomware. But why did you have to spend that money on improving the defaults from Microsoft or from AWS or put in your vendor here? I think that would be. I'm trying to come up with a question here. Is this more of me, Mike, doing a soapbox thing? But
we know why bad defaults are there. We could talk about why bad defaults are there, right, in the first place. Is that the question you're going for?
Yeah, basically, why are they there, and where should we be spending our money better? Where could we be smarter about spending money?
Yeah, you want to take that? I can. So
I save the easy questions for the end.
Yeah. So it's we've seen a lot of cases where the question was why didn't this data lake as a service company require MFA? It wasn't them getting compromised, but when 100 of your customers gets compromised through credential stuffing, you have to think about that responsibility, right? The reason defaults are bad is because it's an easy way to get things working. And traditionally in IT, the moment we get things working, nobody touched this. Don't touch anything. It's working. Don't screw it up. It took us a long time just to get this working.
Especially
we had to set everything to any.
Yeah.
We had to turn off security, set everything to any. We couldn't get the SSL certificate to work. But it's up and running, and the business is running. So don't touch anything. And I think that is, it makes it easier to sell products when there's less friction. Obviously it's hard to sell a product if 6 weeks in, you still don't have it up and running. But at the same time, we keep hearing more about resilience. And I think the only way we get there is by, going through the hard work of locking things down more and being prepared for all the different ways something can break and recovering it.
I think the cost question is really interesting. I mean, there's been some very recent examples of how much it can actually cost. I mean, people think of cybersecurity and they go, look, X cybersecurity product is going to cost me whatever amount it is. If you compare and contrast that with how much it can cost to be the victims of an attack, it suddenly brings everything into really sharp focus. I mean, the probably the best and most recent example is the Jaguar Land Rover attack in the UK. Yeah. I mean, they were basically
biggest ever, maybe.
There was an Irish one, which I'll mention in a second, which was probably more expensive in the long run. But I mean, they were talking about over 200 million it had cost them so far, $200 million it had cost Jaguar Land Rover.
No, it's in the billions. It's in the billions at this point.
They went looking to the UK government to back them for, I think, 1.3 billion or something, for what's probably going to be the long cost of it. The one I mentioned was the attack on the HSE, the Irish Health Service, in 2021, cost almost 500 million to recover from. So you look at numbers like that, and I mean, even the average cost of ransomware, I think it's somewhere in the 600,000 range, or the average cost of an attack is like in the 600,000 range. So I mean, you look at those numbers, and then you say, well, how much is it going to cost me to properly protect myself in terms of A, products or solutions, or B, staff, and it pales into insignificance when you compare it with those massive numbers.
Yeah, and I think especially with ransomware groups are going to be like, oh, let's see how much cybersecurity insurance does this company have? We'll aim for 80%.
Jaguar Land Rover's case.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, in that case,
none. That was a zero for people not looking at the video.
Yeah, but they also, so that is one of the first things they will look for. If they get access to an environment, they're going to try and figure out how much your cyber insurance is. The other thing they actually look for is quite interesting is how much you've got in the bank. Because there's no point, if you've only got $1 million in the bank, there's no point in asking you for 10 because you're not going to be able to come up with it. So they have it seems, and again, there's no definitive research on this, but it seems that the sweet spot is somewhere about 30% of what you've got available in the bank is what they will ask for. So it's kind of uncomfortable enough to make everybody feel comfortable, if that makes sense, or uncomfortable, if that makes sense. They're not going to ask for too much because they know you can't pay it. So they try and figure out what the sweet spot is, and it seems to be about 30% of your available funds.
I'm laughing too, because it also feels like many startups, when they're just trying to sell their cybersecurity tools, ask, well, what's your budget? It can kind of feel
there are some similarities.
There's some similarities there, yes. But Rob, you've been very friendly as one of the vendors. I want to thank you for your time. But before we let you go, I want to remind you that we always ask our guests to describe AppSec in 3 words. Now, earlier this segment, you also mentioned, I agree, that a lot of security is a series of steps. I'll give you that as a freebie if you want, even though perhaps that wasn't your intentional answer. But how would you describe AppSec in 3 words?
So, full disclosure, I actually asked ChatGPT to give me some suggestions, and the suggestions it gave me was absolutely rubbish. So I've completely discarded all the suggestions that ChatGPT gave me, and what I've come up with myself is zero trust always.
I think that's quite fair. And you're always going to be welcome to come back and talk more about the dangers of ransomware, what it looks like over the holidays. Maybe, it'll be good in January to have a postmortem just to see what happened to the e-commerce and non-e-commerce sites throughout the November, December
time frame. Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks again, Rob. Appreciate you joining us.
No problem, Mike. Pleasure.
I want to say thank you to Adrian as well. Thank you to all of you. If you'd like to learn more about ThreatLocker, visit securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. And now we're going to take a quick break and return with news of the week. Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter, METER. Generative AI is powerful, but it comes with real risks, from prompt injection to data leakage misuse and agentic AI. The OWASP Gen AI Security Project unites a global community of expert practitioners who tackle these challenges every day. Together, they've built practical playbooks, adoption guides, and the OWASP Top 10 for LLMs, resources any team can apply right now to strengthen AI security. And it doesn't stop there. This is open source, built by practitioners, for practitioners, working together to secure generative AI. Visit securityweekly.com/OWASP to use the playbooks and join the effort to protect tomorrow's intelligence today. Welcome back to Application Security Weekly. We just talked with Rob Allen about ransomware, secure defaults, and convincing software vendors to create better defaults. I'm your host, Mike Shima. I'm here with a better default host, Adrian Sanabria. Glad to have you back, Adrian.
I don't know if I'm a better default host. I love having John here, but I am happy to be an alternative configuration.
Alternative configuration, because indeed, we do love John and Kalyani both. But now, one of the things, so that's at least 3 candidates or co-hosts that I could list. But if we're talking about lists, Adrian, the OWASP Top 10 has a new release candidate out. So this is, I think they first came out in November, but it came across my radar this week because we are in November. Look at time. And one of the nice things about this is that the preamble talks about what some of the changes are. I'll get to that in a second. But there's also a section of establishing a modern application security program that talks about putting the list into perspective. Like, how do you consume a list? But before we talk about consuming it, let's actually talk about what's on there. So for me, broken access control bumped up there to number 1. And in a way that maybe speaks to the conversation we just had with Rob, in the sense of someone clicks on a link, malware is installed on a user endpoint, And then the attackers go and pivot from there to everything else, sort of that credential reuse, et cetera. And maybe that is also AO7 authentication failures. But there's nothing, I guess. I'll mention one other thing, then throw over to you. There's a completely new one on here called the mishandling of exceptional conditions, way down at number 10. A new category that's mostly capturing logic errors. Do you fail open? Do you fail close?
Yeah, it looks like a catch-all for a bunch of
but we're
related
starting
things.
to get kind of insecure design is a catch-all for many things as well. So the top 10 is broadening into catch-alls, perhaps. It's also has a lot of CWEs, but I want to get your sense of the top 10. Either there's something that appealed to you more from this list, or looks like more of the same, or something else.
Yeah, I'm wondering. Well, so first of all, before we even dive into those, it looks like this is the 8th installment of the OWASP Top 10, and this is the OWASP Top 10, not one of the 70 other Top 10s that they now have, right?
There's a million.
This is the main AppSec one, and I noticed, recognized a few names under the lead authors there.
yeah.
Tanya Jonka is down there, Andrew Vanderstock, Brian Glass. But I wonder, the fact that they do a release candidate, I wonder how much yelling happens to put this together, how much debate, argument, and the fact that they make it a release candidate means they're opening it up for me and you and everyone listening to also yell at them before it becomes final and make arguments for maybe moving things around further. I assume that's the purpose of having a public release candidate.
Indeed. And I think part of the yelling is going to come because they mentioned they have
and don't yell at them. That's just a turn. Yeah. It's just how I'm
yes,
phrasing
we're
it.
definitely saying that with a smile.
Please don't
And
yell.
I think we've had Andrew, Brian, and Tanya on ASW as well. So yes,
nice.
This is friendly feedback. But part of the reason that yelling does occur, there's gnashing of the teeth, is they have data from over 2.8 million applications that a lot of this is based on. Now, they also elsewhere mentioned that what is an application is an eternal challenge. I mean, this was a challenge I had 20 plus years ago, trying to just do, sell some pen testing about, well, how big is your application? Is it 1 page, 10 pages, 100? How complex is it? Set that aside. What stands out to me is that some of the percentages, their ranking is, I'm going to say, let's see, where it's security misconfiguration. 3.00% of the applications tested have one or more of the 16 CWEs in this category. Now, part of me is like, okay, they've got a couple million data points, but double digits of in their percentages is possibly an illusion of accuracy in a bit. But that's a little bit of quibbling of just how was the list put together. Things that stood out to me was, like I just said, A2 has 16 CWEs. Cryptographic failures, they reference 32. Injection has 38. And they make a point about why not just list CWEs? Because CWEs they have weird granularity. Some of them apply to a framework, some of them apply to a language. But to me also, I don't think I ever talk about CWEs or care about CWEs unless I'm talking to another AppSec person. Adrian, have you ever used CWEs in a discussion with developers or in with a security planning type of scenario?
No. I'll only with other security folks. I know folks who are huge fans of CWE because with the CWE, I think things can be more explainable, instead of explaining the specific vulnerability you're talking about or saying, we're always looking for ways in vulnerability management to summarize things to make them more consumable for the other party rather than just, throwing a bunch of, discrete vulnerabilities over the wall, thousands and thousands of things. But yeah, CWE, I almost never use unless I'm having a vulnerability management conversation with somebody else.
Yeah, and that's why
also does vulnerability management.
Indeed, and that's why I wanted to. This is the episode where Mike complains a lot because I was doing some friendly complaining in the first segment with Rob about.
I have some complaining ready for you.
Oh, good, because one of the things I've complained about the OWASP Top 10 is it's very much a victim of its own success in the sense of it raises awareness. But if you look at A3, and the top 10 even says this, it overwhelmingly was voted a top concern in the community survey, even though there's only 5 CWEs associated with it. And it had a limited presence in that collected data of 2.8 million applications. But I think we would be hard pressed to say software supply chain failures is not a problem that people should be dealing with. So that's one thing.
Why would we measure it by the number of CWEs, right? And that's one of my complaining bits here is that vulnerability management is very good at helping to create what I think is a huge problem in cybersecurity, which is the creation of busy work. That doesn't accomplish any goals, doesn't lower risk, doesn't make things better for the business or for our users. There are so many tools that are just so good at creating busy work. And you're going to spend a lot of time. You're going to fix a bunch of cross-site scripting on pages with no form elements and all kinds of things like cryptographic failures fell from A2 to A4. I think it should just fall off the map entirely. Like we just do not see, with the exception of LastPass and criminals actually decrypting LastPass password databases to get access to cryptocurrency. It's exceedingly rare, and we don't have a single case of anybody attacking TLS, SSL, encryption in transit, because it's just not necessary for attackers. But there's a ton of busy work associated with cryptographic failures. And I think cryptographic standards are incredibly important. I think the fact that NIST does such a good job with the best practices and standards is the reason why we never see attackers attacking encryption, right? But at the same time, I think there needs to be more of a reality check in the top 10 where we prioritize the things attackers are actually using, the things that are actually resulting in losses, monetary losses to businesses or loss to availability or operations going down, that kind of thing. And I think we do have some of those on here. And certainly there can be things on here that are contributors to that are maybe not the main way that something fails in a breach. But there's some busy work on this top 10 list.
There is, and you're highlighting two great things. One is that aspect of the allure of, hey, we can measure something because vulnerability management can go and scan and look at this list of CVEs. Hey, there were 40,000 CVEs in 2024. How scary is that? But if a bunch of them are RDoS, like good luck, like coming up with a realistic exploit in a production system. For
200
RDoS.
of them are important, right?
Yeah,
out of that 40,000.
And it's almost rounding errors of percentages that are actually exploited. And even to your point about cryptographic failures, it's fun to say don't roll your own crypto and point out to failures, but one of the greatest design aspects of TLS 1.3 is it just removed those foot guns. And a little bit of a callback to what you were saying the last segment with Rob. It's very hard to misconfigure and misuse TLS 1.3. It's just going to work. It's going to secure you. Move on. I'll put a little asterisk there about post-quantum encryption, but we're still just talking about the key, the handshake. We're not talking about the symmetric part being exposed to the symmetric encryption is not going to be broken by post-quantum computers. And I think that's a great reason for people to go back and listen to your Halloween episode. Yeah. But another thing that I'm going to take and broaden this now too is, again, still in the OWASP top 10, that section I referred to earlier about establishing a modern application security program. This is where I very strongly agree with you in the sense of why isn't the list more, the list is just about things that could go wrong in an application. It's not so much about what should you do. You don't go through the list and say, oh, we took care of the first one. Now let's take care of number 2. Now we're working on number 3. And even the top 10 document itself, it says it's an awareness document. It's bringing awareness to critical risks. If you want to adopt a standard, go jump over to ASVS. And there's a great line that I think needs to be reiterated more is that OWASP, discourages any claims of full coverage of the OWASP top 10 then they're talking about like scanners or tools, things like that, because it's simply untrue. And that's the thing where we in the cybersecurity industry are definitely not helping ourselves with claims like we scan for all the top 10, we protect you against all the top 10.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a really good point. I think it might have been a point you made in the last conversation, or maybe a point that Rob made, is that another common myth here and pitfall is assuming that the data you have is comprehensive, that it covers everything, right? Like when you run a vulnerability scanner, if that scanner doesn't discover all the assets correctly, or I did some work for a company. We used to go in and just check configurations. This was a consulting product that we had. We would log into your security tools and look for misconfigurations. Again, to call back to our previous conversation. And in one of those, we're looking at a DAST scanner, and they were scanning 14 websites using the domain name as the input for scanning. 13 of the 14 websites were misspelled. They had somehow managed to leave the M off of .com, so they were scanning the .co versions of these websites, for which the domains didn't even exist. But because they spelled one of them correctly, they were getting results. And because they were getting results, they thought everything was fine. But in fact, they had never scanned 13 of their 14 websites. So again, like there are these folks out there that see a bunch of data and they think, oh, this is amazing. We can do amazing things with this data without thinking, what is this data covering? Like, is this showing me 100%? Is it showing me 20%? Is it showing me 60% of what I should be seeing? And we don't ask that question often enough.
Absolutely. That idea of what is the coverage, which is what you were describing. And then I'll also just invert that, because the top 10, or I'll say scanning for the top 10, by its nature is relatively reactive. This is reactive steps. Hey, we built our software, or we're using software. Does it have any known vulnerabilities? And that's the whole aspect too of all the third-party dependencies. In that conversation with Rob, there was, we talked a little bit about the importance of being proactive. Let's avoid these problems in the first place. And that's where I still would love, A6. And this is the one that they say it was introduced in 2021, but it's just that catch-all of insecure design. I do love the idea. We need better secure by design, secure by default, have threat modeling that's not just done all the time, but that's a considered threat modeling for how can these features be misused, abused, or how can we just mitigate if a problem happens over in this component, it's not going to have a catastrophic effect over all the other components. And it's hard to pick up specifics.
A lot of these are related in different ways too. Like insecure design, I think, is directly related to security misconfiguration. Again, call back to our previous conversation where maybe the default configuration is terrible, and that is part of your secure design, is to have a better default configuration. And then the mishandling of exceptional conditions. How does your software fail? Does it write anything useful out when it fails? Are you logging the right things? Is there even a debug mode for it? And I think a lot of that kind of goes back to insecure design, in my opinion.
It does. And we're going to have you back with John and Kalyani to do my OWASP Top 10 pop quiz, because as you mentioned, there's been at least 8, possibly even 9, because the very first, was it 2003, had a quick iteration. But so many that authentication failures or identification and authentication failures are in so many of the different flavors of the top 10 lists. But we can't talk about top 10 forever. I did want to save some time because there's some other news out there, but the other news, unfortunately, still calls LLM. So we're never going to avoid them. We thankfully avoided too many agents and LLM discussions in our conversation with Rob. But here is an article I grabbed from OpenAI. Now, admittedly, it's more marketing at the moment than a meaty technical article, but it is introducing Aardvark, OpenAI's agentic security researcher. Now, I grabbed this not because I want to give OpenAI free advertising, which unfortunately, I just did. But everybody right now in this cybersecurity community is trying to figure out how can this agent work, being a security assistant. I mean, we saw that with the AI Cyber Challenge this summer at DEF CON, where you have AI plus an LLM or AI plus a scanner, or as I always like to joke, you just have grep. And so I think part of the reason I grabbed this was to do the classic John Kinsella. Let's look at this in 6 months to see how did GPT-5 and this security researcher compare against grep or against other tools that possibly have different lower economics to run, because there's nothing new here in the sense of analysis. Okay, commit scanning, validating. Is this vulnerability exploitable, and can I develop a patch? There is some appeal to that developing a patch for sure. But I don't know how much of this are you looking forward to, or even would be playing with, Adrian?
Yeah, I think this is one of the few things in AI that I'm really, really excited about.
Okay.
I should say one of the few. I think it's really useful as an assistant. Wasn't useful for Rob for the 3 words AppSec in
Yes.
3 words, but I find it useful in some things. But if I were to take a guess here, I have heard, and I don't think it's a secret, I think this has been talked about publicly, that Dave Aitel, who runs security over at OpenAI, that their team is almost entirely using AI to find and fix vulnerabilities. So I would assume that this is an extension of what they've been using internally, dogfooding internally for a while. So I would expect this. I mean, it is a beta. It's an open beta that you can sign up for. But I imagine it's probably a pretty functional beta if this is what they've been using internally at OpenAI. The thing that worries me about this, so on the good side, I can see a potential future where backlogs go away, right? Like those things that sprint to sprint to sprint get pushed every single time, that they're never high enough priority to get covered. The idea we can make those go away with AI, I think it gets me excited. On the bad side, we had 40,000 CVEs in 2024. We could have 1 million CVEs, in 2026 if AI is just going to find this stuff. And I don't think that's going to change a percentage of the quality of CVs in there being just a very, very tiny percentage of 1%, fraction of 1% that are vulnerabilities we actually need to worry about. So I do worry about it just generating a lot of garbage and noise.
And that's why I'm curious too, because even a lot of the open source projects out there are getting crushed in just LLM generated patch suggestions to fix something that is, okay, it's a bug, but it's more about code correctness, code quality than actual exploitable vuln or a meaningful vuln with risk associated with it. And there was even a line in this article where they applied their agent to open source projects, and they, as they say, responsibly disclosed numerous vulns, 10 of which received CVEs. I would love to know which 10 CVEs those are to get a sense of what style of what class of vulnerabilities is this finding? Is it finding just relatively common injection overflow? So basically something that you could find with grep. And what was the relative severity of it? What CVSS score did these CVEs have? Just as, it's a sample of 10, but that seems to point to it's not finding tons of things. Obviously, take that with a grain of salt. I'm reading between the lines, but that's why I say up front, come back in 6 months and we'll see what this agent is doing.
So there was an article we covered in ASW where the maintainer of curl said, sure, like these things can spit out a lot of crap, but a good experienced bug hunter using AI, basically people are saying, and he is specifically saying here, Daniel Stenberg, that actually there's some really positive things, like some really, really good finds coming out of it when you combine somebody who knows what they're doing with AI. So I think we've seen this a lot where we were hoping generative AI would upskill junior people and enable people who were not very experienced. And we found it's kind of the opposite. Like you need the experience to know when the quality coming out is bad and to throw it away. And you need, and that is a baseline requirement to get better quality prompts, to know that you have to improve your prompt in the first place and push towards better output. So I think actually AI is much better paired with very experienced people to be more efficient in finding good bugs. So, and we know in bug bounty, there will be script kiddies out there, with no experience. They won't recognize bad output when they see it. And they're just going to get banned on BugCrowd and HackerOne and places like that for just throwing too much trash into the system. But some hope there.
Some hope. And that's a good point, because curl is actually one of the projects I had in mind when I was describing the aspect of how much do you care about correctness, because they do care about code correctness, code quality. So if there is curated AI output to say, oh, this is potentially vulnerable, or here's a flaw, or here's something where the code doesn't actually match the comment, one of them is wrong, figure out which and true them up. That's something that curl does actually want to invest in. But not every open source project has that time, has that priority of code correctness versus feature development. And that's not a judgment call. That is just a choice of where to invest time, especially when it's free time. And speaking of investing time, Adrian, I've got 2 more articles about basically AI, LLMs, and prompt injection and abusing LLMs, as well as a fun reference to the history old school frack article, Smashing the Stack for Fun and Profit, which is its 29th birthday was just last Saturday. Where would you like to spend our time closing out this news segment?
Which one is the Smashing the Stack? Maybe I just need to refresh here.
That's the old frack article, the Aleph 1 paper. That's basically a bunch of really simple explanation and ASCII art about here's a buffer overflow. Here's how the stack is created.
I'm familiar with the old one. Yeah. I'm just looking for which story it was.
Yeah, I was mostly describing for our listeners too, who may not be familiar.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, of course. Part of the reason that I pull that up is that it is a famous paper and it's still pretty accessible and good to learn. So it's one of those few papers that I would recommend that is kind of that shared knowledge or shared culture of application security. It obviously is old and doesn't talk about canaries, KASLR, all these types of things, like even return ROP. But it's a good way to start with just what should I be concerned about in terms of memory safety issues, which hopefully these go away as we see more Go and Rust be adopted. So that was one of the reasons I just pulled that in as a fun bit of history rather than just talking about LLMs all the time. So let's give you the chance for some last words here about your thoughts on the news of the week, either one of the other articles or something else that we already talked about, Adrian.
Oh, man, I am just tired of AI. I don't know how tired of AI you are, but
Join the club, yeah.
Okay, it's somewhat useful, and I think we are going to see some pullback at some point here. In some areas where we've been using AI for a while, I think we've gotten a handle on where it's useful, where it's not useful. With vibe coding and stuff like that, I think we're still right in the middle of experimentation, and especially with AI browsers being all over the place. I still think we have a ways to go before we can stop talking about that stuff in the news week to week. But yeah, there are, and some of them are called out in your story number 2 here. I'm most concerned about indirect prompt injection. Like, the attack surface is the entire internet, right? For some of the stuff, like cases where all you have to do is send somebody an email and you can pull data out of their Google Drive. because they're using Copilot, or, just by browsing someone's website, all of a sudden we're back to 2010 where just browsing a website can get you hacked, right? It's crazy that we're back there, but yeah, there's some interesting stuff you can do with it as well. I actually use an AI browser when I do Enterprise Security Weekly, because sometimes I don't have time to read the full articles. So I can ask it questions about the web page that I'm on and get very quick answers and make it seem like I've actually prepared much better and read the stuff ahead of time. So even I am finding, I do have Perplexity Comet on here, and I use it for ASW when I do a news segment. But I'm still very worried about it at the same time.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I have not embraced any of the AI for my summarization or reading or understanding, but I still have a couple go-to phrases and topics in a very political manner of, well, rather than the question you asked me, I'm going to answer the one that I want to talk about. And that's a little podcaster trick about reading the news. Yeah. So I appreciate that. Yes. Adrian, bringing us a little bit of honesty and a little bit of, I think, shared experience. John I don't think it's a danger to say John would strongly agree with you about we try not to cover LLMs all the time because what is there is new. So we'll come back in 6 months and see what happens. But I can't keep you for another 6 months. Our time is done here, Adrian. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciated it. I want to say thank you to everyone else. Please remember to subscribe, check out the show notes, share on the socials. And speaking of, Halloween is still just not too far away in our rear view mirror. Check out Haunted Highway by Laserhawk. We'll see you next time on Application Security Weekly.